G'day everybody, how you going today? It is so good to see you. I do hope you are super well. Today I want to talk about a brand new lens from Meike. This is a 55mm 1.8 full frame, full AF and AE lens. And Meike are calling it a Pro lens. Now this lens, it comes for Z mount, E mount, and for L mount. Here is the Meike. Now I've reviewed quite a few lenses from Meike, and in this video we're going to talk about the build quality, and we're also going to look at some images. In PhotoLab, it does things a little bit differently from Capture One. Got a similar sort of setup with thumbnails, and our edit palette is on the right instead of the left. This is the 55mm. We are shooting on the Z6 III in RAW at 100%. This is looking absolutely beautiful. None of these files have had any adjustments done. This is just my short list. Of course, bring up the shadows here with Nikon cameras. We have this awesome dynamic range, very easy to see. And in this image, I wanted to show you the out of focus areas that the background looks very, very creamy, deliciously creamy. Flip it the other way, and now our foreground areas are out of focus. Bring up those shadows a little bit. That is literally all I'm doing here. This is how it is for color. What we might do is just bring down the highlights a little bit. We can press on Clearview. I shoot all of my images in flat profile. If we click on Clearview, it's just giving us a little bit more contrast, a little bit more intensity. Look, I love what's going on here. We obviously can control that contrast. I often add contrast to my images, micro contrast and fine contrast. It's all available here, and that actually becomes a really beautiful image. We have the out of focus areas in the foreground clearly going through down to the beach, and we can go into 100%. That's pixel for pixel. So let's just click on that Clearview straight off and bring up the shadows a tad. There's an image that looks great. Now you've got a whole lot of fine grain control, as much as you could possibly want. I do think towards the edges it does get a little bit softer, but you know, I'm completely okay with that. This lens seems to sit, from my perspective, somewhere between a more traditional DSLR style of lens creation and with the advantages of mirrorless lenses. We have this character that comes with it, Purple Fringing here, in these harshest of situations, and it's doing a fantastic job. Chromatic aberration, like a lot of other issues with lenses, is becoming a non-thing when you have this level of control, and PhotoLab does that for us. And yeah, that has cleaned it up magnificently. Let me turn that back on. You can see it everywhere, and off, removed. How good is that? And if it's something that you're interested in, the channel has an offer at the moment, a 15% discount code with DXO. To purchase the Elite Edition is only $229 for a lifetime license. Links below, and a small percentage of the sale goes to the channel, which is a great way to support future content. Now, close focus, it is 55 centimeters, which is around 2 feet. This still means that you can get a pretty good shot at 100%. We can see what it looks like. Pull up the contrast here. We can just make that feel a little bit sharper, that little bit more crunchy, and you've got a lot of fine grain control on what direction you want to take your images in. 1985, I believe, was the first time I was in a darkroom printing my own images, and the capacity we have versus a darkroom experience to modify our pixels, to control all of these nuances of our images, is pretty spectacular. Depth of field and color rendition, the camera is doing a great job. We are at 1/8000th wide open, and in this case I would like to add a little bit more micro contrast, but what that's doing for us is bringing up those background clouds. If we want to mask out the sky and have some control over the micro contrast there, then there you go. And what that allows us to do is bring those clouds up in the sky, but we are not affecting the foreground areas where I can bring that micro contrast back down. So that means we've got selective contrast. Maybe I want to bring up the saturation just a little bit. I'd probably bring that exposure down a little bit. You could totally use use this image or an image like this for an advertising campaign, no problem. Very little to do here. Bring up the shadows a bit. File is done. Looks great. Lens looks great. Beautiful, subtle image. And that's popping really nicely, the difference between foreground and background, and just the smallest amount. This is a file with absolutely no adjustments, and I am happy to leave it as it is. The color in this image is the sunset. Something else that we can see here is there is a slight amount of distortion when we look on the left and the right. PhotoLab does not have a profile for this lens. I'm not even sure if the Z-mount version of this lens is actually released yet. Sometimes it takes a little while for profiles to come about. Not every profile exists for every lens known to man. I suspect it will come at some time. As always, these sorts of things can be corrected, and with an adjustment that has made an impact probably somewhere around the 10 mark, we've straightened that up a fair bit. Just another element of lenses. We've talked about purple fringing. We've talked about vignetting. We've talked about distortion. All of these elements can now be corrected. So it's the character of the lens. It doesn't have the epic sharpness that we find with Nikon's S-class lenses, but it does have a very pleasing look to it, and it's more than sharp enough for the type of usage that it might be used for, which is, say, street or portraiture, journalism. As a video lens, a talking head lens, there's all sorts of use cases that are applicable for a lens like this where razor sharpness is just not necessary, and I think it's actually a really beautiful looking lens, the images that are coming from it. Here I wanted to show not only the power and capability of this lens, that's the sun up there in the trees, but also just the power of the Z6 files coupled with DxO PhotoLab 8. We have the ability to bring this file up. There's so much latitude, we can bring the highlights down so that's not blowing out. Something we can see here again is this purple fringing. Let's see how it handles this purple fringing, because I think that's even more intense than the previous one that we looked at. It's had a really good go at it, and we are zoomed in at almost 200%, and that's on. I think that's a really successful outcome with everywhere in the trees and so on. It doesn't render it when it's showing you this view, just a kind of preview. It's not actually the file that will be exported. We've exported that file, we've opened that JPEG in preview, which is just kind of Apple's built-in software, and if we zoom in, those adjustments have still been applied. Now, this is not rolling shutter, that is a fishing rod that is bending. I just really like the way it looks, and there's the fishing line. It's there. It's looking sharp. We are at 1/5000th of a second shutter speed f1.8. So 1.8. This is a very short depth of field, and I think that's doing fabulously. This image is untouched. Bring it up a little bit. Done. That's a finished image. We can bring down those highlights a little bit. We're not going to get as much out of them. We can bring up the shadows if we want to, but I actually quite like the way this is. But we are getting a little bit of purple fringing. It can come and go on the ocean just depending exactly what your aperture is, what your focus is, and then the distance from the camera of the subject. All of these things affect chromatic aberration. Let's just turn that up to maximum, and it's doing a great job. I feel like that's effectively removed a significant difference from, well, very obvious. That's 100%, but let's turn that on. I think that's an outstanding result. Again, it'll appear, but if we export it, completely removed here in the preview file. Sharpness is here on the sprinkles. Who doesn't love some sprinkles? Let's bring up those shadows a little bit. We can see a little bit of green fringing in this one. Let's have a look at how our tool fixes that. We'll turn them both to max. Interestingly, clicking on the purple fringing button here has removed some of that green fringing. What a great result. I think that's fantastic. You can see the difference there. Tiny bit of vibrance. Does just feel slightly too blue for me. So let's just warm that up. And there is the Meike 55mm. That is a great looking file. Nice and sharp. The waffle cone looks just great. This is 1/250th 1.8 ISO 100. The sun has set. 1/100th ISO 100 f1.8. We are getting dark now. Is that razor sharp? No, it's not. But let's add a little bit of fine contrast. Makes quite a big difference. Fine contrast, that's changing the whole background, the clouds, everything to be used carefully. Nice moody file, and perhaps you might want to make a file like this, black and white. Here's me, photographed by my wife. She liked the way I looked in the tail lights. That's why this is here. And we went from 40 degrees here in Melbourne to, it was about 16 degrees the following day. This was just a couple of days ago. Astonishing, the change in the weather. there's some raindrops being captured by the Meike 55mm. Hard to choose which file here to play with, but what I want to show you is also something that PhotoLab do. A piece of software I've been using, I don't know, somewhere between 15 and 20 years, 2005 and 2010, somewhere in that space, I started using the Nik Collection. Making black and white images was very important to me. You can just export straight out of PhotoLab into Nik, and then you have this extraordinary capacity to create black and whites. There's a lot of fantastic built-in presets that you can go through, which I quite like, and I've used a number of these in the past, even adding grain, all sorts of other layers. But ultimately what we've got here is very quickly something that has a very authentic film look from my perspective. And the only way film gets more filmic is because parts of the image are out of focus because of the digital scan that you might have done, or there are drying marks on the negative or scratches and so on. You can actually add those sorts of things as well. You can go to software like this, which gives you an unbelievable level of control. You can get beautiful results really, really quickly. But it goes beyond this because you've got all of this fine grain control over here, which allows you to really, and this is what I used to do in the darkroom, playing with different grades, different paper grades, and then dodging and burning different areas to, for example, make the clouds more moody. This is one beautiful way that you can create black and whites. DxO has also offered a 15% discount code for the Nik Collection version 7. The Nik Collection does far more than amazing black and whites. We also have a deep control of color files, tone and color adjustments, HDR creation, advanced sharpening tools, powerful noise reduction, perspective correction, and analog effects to simulate film. All of this within the Nik Collection for only $149 US for a once-off lifetime license. Links below. This is just the sort of study that I really like. Reflections and lines and textures and rain and the mood of the ocean. Probably bring this file up a little. And this is a color file, even so it looks monochromatic. I've pulled no color out of it. This is what the day looked like. It really was this harsh. But we might choose to make it black and white. We might not. Let's just bring that contrast up a little. I would be really happy with a file like that. To finish our look at the 55mm 1.8, bring up the shadows, put a little bit of color into it. It's the beer keg test, 100% looking fantastic. Back to me. All right, that was the images. As we can see there, I really like how the bokeh looks from this lens. It's nice and light. It's easy to handle. It's only around 345, 46 grams. And the current price is around $350 US. So that doesn't make it the cheapest on the market. It's weather sealed. It's fast at focusing, and it looks great from my perspective. Now, 55mm, it's perhaps not for everybody. The very first Sony E-mount lens that I purchased was the 55mm for that system, which I still have today. At the end of the day, there's very, very little difference between 50 and 55mm. I think we would really hardly be able to see that difference. The external build is plastic or some form of composite. We just don't know exactly what's in here. If they do it like Nikon, you never know. There might be some carbon fiber nanotubes in there, or there might not be. Who knows? The focus ring feels pretty good. I could probably have just a little bit more resistance in that ring. The interesting thing about a focus ring in this day and age is I suspect the majority of people don't really use them. And that might be part of why with some lenses, they don't seem to be exactly how you want them to be. And I think that's kind of fair enough. Something else interesting about this Pro lens is we have a clicking aperture, super cool. On the side here, an AF and MF switch. That's all we're going to find on here. Of course, it does come with a metal mount, and it does come with a USB-C port for updating firmware. Although so many of these lenses do, and so often I don't seem to need to update them. Interesting, isn't it? And also it comes with this rather prominent rubber gasket here, which does indicate a degree of weather sealing. Good to see. Alrighty, well there it is, the 55mm 1.8 Pro from Meike. Do you want it on E, L, or Z mount? It's available for all. Please let me know what you think of this lens in the comments below. Is it for you, or do you have something else on your mind? And I'd also love to know, is 50mm a focal length that you like to shoot with? I certainly do. I shoot with it all the time. We're shooting on it right now with the Nikon Z6 III and the 50mm 1.2, always looking spectacular from my perspective. All right, it's been so good to see you, and if this is your first time here, I would love to see you again, so please do subscribe, please share, and please like. All right, bye for now.